One of the best things that I've done for my photography recently is to invest a lot of time and effort into printing. Now, I could spend weeks, months, or even years working towards capturing that perfect moment in a local woodland. So to turn that image into something physical and tactile that I can pick up and appreciate all the colour, texture and detail, or perhaps even frame that print and put it on the wall, or for somebody else to buy a copy and put it on their wall, there's a lot of self-satisfaction and fulfilment wrapped up in that. And also, a couple of months ago, I committed to running my very first solo exhibition. So that's happened. That was on the 15th of September. And it was so good. I cannot stress enough how happy I was with that day. Just to have all my work in nice frames and printed quite large, and just people wandering around and appreciating them. It was great, and it was important that I spent as much time as I possibly could in the printing, just to make those images as good as they possibly could be at that moment in time. So that's what I've been very busy with. So I thought it would make sense just really to do a video just to talk about printing a little bit more, and just to very briefly go through how I go about printing, but talk a little bit about why I think it's important to print as well. So this isn't a deep dive tutorial, it is just a bit of a brief overview to give you a bit of an insight into my general workflow, but hopefully you'll pick up a couple of tips along the way anyway. So one of the first and most crucial steps towards getting accurate prints from your printer is to make sure your monitor is calibrated and profiled. So you're going to need a calibration device. I use this one, which is a Datacolor Spider 5. And it's really good, to be honest. It does the job quite nicely. I won't show you how to use it because it really is straightforward. It comes bundled with some software. Install that, go through that, it'll guide you through. It's nice and intuitive. But essentially what it's doing is going to measure the ambient light in the room and adjust the screen brightness accordingly. But it's also going to measure the colour output from your monitor and adjust that to try and get as close to industry standards as possible. So that really is an essential step. And I know with my monitor, which is a Dell, off the peg was really very bright and quite cool. So after calibrating it went to about 25% brightness and became a lot warmer as well. So once you've got that calibrated, then you need to get color profiles, ICC profiles for your paper of choice. Now, the papers that I'm currently using, I'm not loyal to any particular brand whatsoever, but at the moment I am using Photo Speed, and now I use about probably 3 different papers for them, but predominantly 2. And one of my current favourites is the Natural Soft Textured Bright White. It's a really nice paper, quite heavyweight, got a nice texture to it, and it is quite a nice bright white colour. So I use that for the cooler type images such as snow, frost, anything that has some nice cool tones in it and I want to keep that coolness, then this is a really nice paper, and I do like that bright whiteness of it. For most of my woodland stuff, a paper that I'm using a lot at the minute is the Photo Speed Platinum Etching 285. Not quite as heavy as the NST Bright White. It's a little bit warmer, but the texture's a little bit heavier, and I love this for my general woodland work. It works well with the warmer tones, works well with the greens, and you can almost, you can almost feel the texture in the bark on the trees as well. I think it just gives a lovely feeling, a nice classy feeling to woodland images. So that's another one that I use. The print behind me here from Glencoe, that's the Photo Speed Smooth Cotton 300, so that doesn't have the texture, it's got a nice smooth matte finish, and I kind of like that for the general bigger views and the vistas. Again, it's quite a warm paper, so for that type of scene, I think for me it worked really quite well, and worked quite well with the warmer tones that we've got in the kind of autumn grasses there in Glencoe. So those are the papers that I'm using, but I'm sure lots of other manufacturers will offer a service to create some custom profiles, and if not, then they'll certainly offer some generic profiles. Now, I tried the generic profiles which Photo Speed offer, and to be honest, they didn't really work for me that well. They helped, but they weren't accurate enough, so I went down the custom profile route. And it's quite straightforward. Basically, they'll send you a colour chart, or you can download the colour chart from their website. You print out the colour chart onto your paper of choice using some very basic software. You pop that in the post, send it to them, they'll scan it, and they'll create your own ICC profile, email it over to you, you install it into your system, and you are good to go. Ever since going through that process, it took a few days. The prints that I've been getting out of my Canon Pro 1000, they've been spot on. Very, very happy with them. Colours pretty damn accurate to what I'm seeing on screen. So yeah, it's definitely worth going down the custom profile route if you can. So once you've got all that set up, then it's just a case of preparing your image for print, and then away you go. So I've got an image up on screen now. So this is from Torridon this year. I took this in April. Lovely, lovely misty morning down by the river in this nice characterful Scots pine. But anyway, the first thing you'll notice perhaps is that I'm processing on a white background. Now I highly recommend that if you're printing, then you process on a white background. By default, I think Lightroom gives you a medium grey background. But the trouble with a darker background, it can almost fool you into thinking that the image is brighter than it actually is. So definitely work on a white background, and that's going to help you visualize the image as a print a little bit easier. And also, if you use the L key, that gives you lights out mode. So if you press that twice, then it gives you a nice, clean, uncluttered background so you can review the image without any distractions. So that's a worthwhile thing to do as well. So this is the original RAW file. It's barely had any processing done to it, and all I've done really is to add a tiny bit of contrast and to warm it up slightly as well. To turn this into an image that I'm going to print, I'm going to click on soft proofing down in the bottom left hand corner there. Now this allows me to select the profile that I've installed. So these are the ones provided by PhotoSpeed, and you can see I've got them for 4 different papers here. It's got platinum etching selected. That's the one that I want. I want that nice textured warm paper for this image. You've got a tick box to simulate paper and ink. So you can see it just makes it a little bit flatter. So what you can do is then process this image and adjust this a little bit more. But the first thing that I would do is to click on create proof copy. And all it's essentially doing is creating a virtual copy of the original RAW file. It's not a physical copy, just a virtual one. But it means that you can now do some adjustments for your print version without doing anything destructive to the original RAW file. To be honest, I tend not to really do many adjustments, because from experience, it doesn't really offer much benefit, I don't think, to try and make the image look like the original one that you processed. I accept that when I click on simulate paper and ink, that it's going to make it look a little bit flatter, but I know that once I print it out, that the blacks will come out a little bit deeper and there'll be a touch more contrast than what we see on screen now, particularly because I'm printing on a matte paper. But if you do some processing, and then once you're happy with that, then I know you can print from Lightroom. I prefer to print personally from Photoshop. I don't know why printing from Lightroom just hasn't really worked for me. I've had more accurate results from Photoshop. So I just right click, go to edit in Photoshop. And the good thing about creating the proof copy as well is that if I go back to Lightroom here and I click on information, it actually labels it with a profile up here that I'm using. So it's just good, and just to remember and identify the image and remember what paper you originally intended to print on. So here we are in Photoshop. Now, another quick tip is to zoom out. View the image as a small thumbnail, because remember, lots of people are going to see the image as a thumbnail. Perhaps as a thumbnail on your website, perhaps you'll have it on a wall and people will see it from a distance. And images, I think, need to work as a thumbnail. It will either entice people to click on it, or they might like the look of it from a distance and they'll want to walk a little bit closer. But also what I find is that by zooming out, it again gives you an idea as to whether the image is too dark, but it also gives you an idea as if you've overdone the vignetting. If you've been adding some vignetting, then the effect can appear quite subtle when you view it quite large like this, but when you zoom out, it can sometimes look a little bit too heavy-handed, so it's worthwhile zooming out and viewing as a thumbnail. So I'm not going to do any further adjustments to this image in Photoshop. I think it's good to go. I might sometimes add a bit of smart sharpening to images, but if the image is pin sharp, I've captured it pin sharp in camera, then I never find any need to add any sharpening in post for the purpose of print. Other adjustments that I might do, I might adjust the level slightly if I've decided that once I've looked at it in Photoshop that it does need some further adjustment in terms of contrast. I might adjust the saturation slightly, but just very, very minor things, and I'll do those as layers, so I'm not doing anything destructive. But once I've got the final version that I'm happy with, I'll save that as a PSD file, and that will be my file that I print from that moment forward. I think this one's ready to go, so I'm just going to press Control P And I'll just check my print settings. Because I'm printing on matte papers, I want to make sure that matte paper is selected here. I'm going to print at A3, so that's all good. High quality print. There is highest. I generally don't think that's necessary. It's essentially just going to lay down more ink, but you're going to get fantastic prints. Well, I find I get really nice prints from the Canon Pro 1000 when I'm just printing on high. I want scale to fit the media. I want to leave some borders, and I think borders are important if you're going to frame the image. It just makes mounting a lot easier. So for an A3 print, I think the height needs to be about 25 centimeters, and that's going to give me a border at the top of about 2 centimeters. But if I just take it away from the center, so I want to actually reduce the border at the top, and I'll put an equal amount to the left, and then that's going to allow me to trim the image on the right hand side, but it's giving me a slightly bigger border at the bottom, which is going to give me a bit more room for numbering and signing the print. I want to make sure that the printer profile is selected here. So again, platinum etching, that's the ICC profile supplied by the paper manufacturer. I want to make sure that color handling is managed by Photoshop, and then that's it, we're good to go. So I'm going to click print on that. So why do I feel that printing is so important? Well, like I mentioned before, there's that sense of self-satisfaction. So everything that you've been working towards just culminates into something physical, you know, something that I can enjoy on a daily basis. Because I think we're at risk of just posting things online and then they just disappear into the digital ether. So it's really nice just to have something that lasts, something that I can perhaps frame, put on the wall and enjoy on a daily basis. And if we are only posting online, and it just feels like a real waste of that image quality. So I've got this 42 megapixel sensor. What is the point in having that if all I ever did was post on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter? So to really take advantage of that amazing image quality, I need to print it out. And by doing that, I think that gives you a really sort of new and fresh appreciation for texture, color, detail and light. And when you start to print at A2 or A1 or even bigger, then that for me is how photographs should be appreciated. And going back to the exhibition, and I will talk about the exhibition in a future video, just to have, I had one image which was 40 inches wide, and that was a real centerpiece. And the sense of self-fulfillment from seeing that, rather than just a tiny little panel on Instagram, was just brilliant, absolutely fantastic. And it was just the feedback that I was getting as well from people that were visiting was how much better it is and how much they appreciated being able to see the images in print rather than just as digital files on YouTube videos. My understanding and appreciation of light has definitely changed with printing too. So I was already starting to appreciate different forms of light, but when printing it really hit home just how very flat and, well, really quite soft light can do great things for prints. So for example, I was in Scotland quite recently and I took a shot under what would appear at first to be quite dull conditions, but it really worked quite well to bring out the very kind of natural pastel type tones in the image and all the subtle detail and the contrast between the autumnal tones and the cooler tones. It needed that soft, evenly distributed light for that to work. But what I've also realised is just how dark a lot of my earlier images were, because I was processing on a darker background and the images were being presented on bright screens as well with dark backgrounds. Then it kind of tricked me into thinking that the images were lighter than they actually were. So now I'm always thinking about printing. I've got printing in the back of my mind. So I've changed my website so that when you enlarge the images, that has a white background. Obviously I process on a white background as well. And it's just really to make sure that when I print images, they have enough light injected into them for them to be successful. Perhaps one of the most valuable benefits of printing though is that it forces us to spend time with an image. I mean, how many times have we taken a shot, we've processed it, published it online, and then once it's served its purpose on Instagram, we've completely forgotten about it. which is a real shame, because if we've got something physical, something that we can hang on the wall, then we can live with that on a daily basis. And then we start to appreciate our work at a much deeper level. We can be judgmental and analyse it and criticise it, or notice little annoyances or any interesting features which we might otherwise have missed. And there might only be very little things, but they can all amount to quite a significant and positive change in our photography moving forward. But also when we view that image, it reminds us of why we do this, or perhaps reminds you of a fantastic experience which you want to repeat. And if you emotionally respond to your print work on the wall in much the same way as you emotionally responded to the scene when you first captured it, then that's a sign of an image which stands the test of time and something that you should be proud of and you should want to display. And when friends and family come to visit, it can become a bit of a talking point as well. And the more that we print and the more that we frame, then perhaps you'll have the opportunity to exhibit as well, which is what I did recently, which was, that was such a rewarding experience. And that's what I want to talk about in my next video, is the process that I went through, the things that I'd learned, and perhaps some of the things which I'd changed moving forward as well. So please tune in for that one. If you're interested in any of my prints, then please take a look at my website. I invest a lot of time into trying to provide a quality product, and I am very proud of the images that are on there. So any support is very much appreciated, but thank you very much for watching this episode, and I hope to see you for the next one.